As promised, I think in the last couple of webinars, we're going to do a little bit of twist stuff today. We'll have Mike Moscato show how to use a couple of the command merge tool and maybe set param from RE to call third-party utilities or Linux executables to run specific things out of twist. Again, if you're new to our webinars, you should have basically a control panel on your right-hand side. If you want to ask questions, please put those in there. If they're applicable to me stopping or worth me stopping Mike and asking the question during the presentation, I'll do that. If not, we'll save them all to the end and kind of go through the questions at the end. If you need to zoom on your screen a little bit, you should have controls in your top left to zoom to whatever percentage you want. And on that, I think I'll turn the ball over to Mr. Moscato and let him begin. So, let's get that done.
Yell at me, Fred, when you see my screen.
That's okay. As soon as I get my mouse back, I'll there we go. Turn this over to you. All right, you should be getting asked. Okay, we see your screen now.
Okay, are we ready to go?
Ready to go.
Okay. The topic that we came up with here is kind of fortuitous because I think after we had kind of decided on this, it just so happened we had a couple support calls within a couple days that deal with this kind of thing. So I think everything I show you today, except for maybe one exception, are real cases that customers are running. The names have been changed to protect the innocent, so you may see something here that is kind of sort of like what you're doing, but they're not exactly the same. I think Fred already covered that stuff, so let's get what we're going to talk about here. And again, we're talking about alternate kind of utilities within Twist, and of course, you initially probably have the notion that Twist can do everything, and you can do it better than everything ever, but we know that that's just not true. So what we're exploring here, and what you'll often have happen to you, you might scratch your head and say, I want to do this, and then you'll realize, geez, I'm not sure Twist can do that. So solutions for things Twist can't do, but which we will call from Twist, or alternatives for things Twist does, but that can be done better with other utilities. And again, you don't tell the DALiM guys we said that. And as I just mentioned, finding out how to use these utilities is one thing, but incorporating them into an actual Twist workflow is something else. And the kind of the stock ways to do that are to call things from the set param from RE tool, command merge tool, sometimes from an external script or from a tickle procedure. The things I'm going to go over today, initially it's an example I'm going to do that's just two very basic built-in Linux utilities, Grep, which is usually used for searching, and sed, which it's an acronym for stream editor. It's really a way to edit text files. And I'll just say right now, the example I'm using for sed is like a tiny, tiny grain of sand compared to the true capabilities of that utility. PDF to text is one to extract text from a PDF. Qtpdf is for PDF manipulations. And I know that at Duo and some of the webinars we've done in the recent past, we've kind of used some other utilities like PDFTK to do some of this stuff, but there are certain limitations we've run into, and this seems to be a good way to do some of this type of PDF, chop them up, slice them apart, put them back together routines. ImageMagick is probably one a lot of you are familiar with. Extremely powerful image manipulation tool. And we're going to go over UF-RAW, which is a RAW converter. The Linux for a few years has this utility called DCRaw, which is pretty much provides a lot of the underpinnings for UFRaw. But in some of the tests we did recently for a customer, we got some pretty nice results using that. So we're going to go over that. Lastly, good things to know when you're trying to attack twist solutions with this kind of stuff. It's pretty common to just test this stuff from the terminal before assuming you just get twist to do it. If you can't get it to work from the terminal, it's probably not going to work in your workflow. The man pages in Linux are your friend, because that's how you often will find out all the different arguments and options you can run with the utility. You'll see in a couple of these workflows this approach we use where we need to actually be able to call a file from in the workflow to feed it to a utility, and that's done with this working dir name thing. And we'll also go over a couple of ways to manage the files as they get chopped up, stashed certain areas, and so forth. Lastly, obviously, to run some of these open source utilities, they have to be installed on your server. And usually with CentOS or Red Hat, you can use the Yum utility, but you may run into issues sometimes where the default repositories that you're using may not be able to find them. So you sometimes may have to add different repositories to your server. And there are cases I've seen where even those routines don't work, and you may have to actually just go either find a precompiled binary or RPM, or maybe you might even have to compile your own. So let's get started and start looking at some stuff. And I think I'm already on the wrong screen. Here we go. The first one I'm going to look at was a request from a customer maybe, I'm going to say, a couple months ago. And here's what they were presented with. Now, what I'm showing you is a very stripped down version of what these guys gave to us. Their task was they had a database full of files and file names, and I believe their estimate was something like 60,000 files. Twist did not read or access the database, so what they did instead is they exported an XML file that had entries for all 60,000 of these files. What they needed to do was be able to submit files that were already named in a certain way. And you can see this one I've highlighted here. For instance, this is the original name of the file. And they needed to rename all of these files for, and again, frankly, I'm not sure of all the details, but however it is they were repurposing them, this file they exported had all of the information for old name, new name. So they wanted to be able to just throw files into Twist and have it automatically rename all these things based on reading this file. So you'll see, and because of the way the file is structured, it's very easy to use, I'm going to start with grep and sed to be able to run this utility. I mean to run the routine. For instance, that's the existing name, that's what we want it to be. That's the existing name, that's what we want it to be. And so what we have here is we know that the new name is always coming on the line after the file. And yes, we're going to look at the terminal while we're doing this sort of stuff. Holy cow. So what do we know? We know, let's say we first want to figure out what line a certain file name is called on, because we know the next line is where the good stuff is, right? So if we run first the grep command, we can get the line number for a file. And I know I'm going to do this wrong probably the first time. So that's what we're looking for, and this is the file we're looking, and you can see it returns for us and tells us that thing is on line 4. So how does this help us? Well, we know the good stuff then must be on line 5. So if we first use grep to find out where it is, we could now use the sed command to find the new name that's sitting on the next line. And again, you got to know some of these funky commands here. So basically what I'm telling sed is to read for me what's on line 5. And we can see right there, that's the new name that I want to assign. Okay, how does that do me any good in Twist? So let's go to a Twist workflow. If you're just trying to gather information with utilities like this, you can usually do this sort of thing in setparam from RE. Now, I'm pretty sure that the more clever folks out there that are listening probably know they could do this whole thing probably in a one-liner or a simple ticket procedure, but for our purposes, we're just going to try to break it down and show how we're manipulating this stuff in Twist. So the first line in this tool is that grep command you just saw me run. And we're grepping based on that file name, right? So we're capturing the file name and we're running it against that stashed file. It's going to extract the line number, so now I know what line that stuff is on. We know that the good stuff is on the next line, right? So we just take what we captured previously and we add 1 to it. Lastly, we now run the sed command, extract the information off of that line number that we want, and we know that it's structured in a specific way, so we can now pull out the new name that we need to name the file. So we basically just run 2, I would call them kind of stock Linux utilities in setparam from RE to give us our information. And to kind of finish it off, they want to store the original file and store the renamed file. So if I grab myself a bucket full of files here, and let's see, where are all my files? Here we go. We're going to throw all of those in this workflow. Now you can see here as well, you have, it's probably usually a good idea to have a little off-ramp here for files that don't match, right? So these are the guys that were not found. And if we look here now at where my files get returned, we can see there's the original file names, and these are the updated file names based on reading that list. If we look at any one of these and expand the process log, right, we can see where grep gave us our line number. We iterated it up 1. That's a fancy word for adding 1, right? And finally, with sed, we extracted the new name and assigned it. So that's a very basic example of using setparam from RE to do this sort of thing. The next one was a request, and I'm probably going to have to go a little faster. I wasted a lot of time on that. This was to run a routine where you extract text out of a PDF. If you are familiar with Twist, you know that for a while the PS check tool has had this option in here. I think it's under the text and fonts tab. This one is use text extraction, right? So although that will give you the text you want, for this customer, he found it to be a bit wanting because what he was seeing here was something like this, and this is out of kind of a fairly structured file, and then there's really no formattings or line endings in it, and it didn't really work for him. So instead, there is a utility for Linux called PDF to text, and again, you got to kind of look through and see the arguments, but again, we're calling this within a setparam from RE tool. One thing you'll see that's pretty common is if you are sitting in a terminal on a Linux server, you can usually just call an executable like that, right? I didn't give any arguments, but you can see it went right to it. Within Twist, though, the default environment variables would not really know what to do if you just said PDF to text. So you usually have to give it the full path to the binary. And in fact, I should get rid of this because that was a test I did earlier. What we're doing was we're running that against, that's our incoming file. That's how you find the file in Twist. And lastly, we're writing it to a text file, and it's not uncommon to use the setup folder in your working directory as kind of a stash area for files. So we've got a text file thrown in there, and what I like to do is I just get the wait on tool and I just go grab it from there and make him the current file. There's ways you can do that in a particular procedure, but this is the very simple lazy man's method to get this stuff to work out of Twist. So I've got a file here, I believe, for PDF to text. And if you just look at the file, this is, you know, one of these DALiM brochures. And the text I showed you earlier came from this file. So I'm going to show you two different results that we can get with that by running PDF to text. Here it comes. And if we take a look now, look what we get. Instead of that mess, we get this, which is a much more organized version of it. In fact, just to show you how, I think I said earlier, the man pages are your friend. When you do the man pages for a lot of these utilities, you can find out different routines that can give you some interesting results that are obviously give you a little more flexibility than what you do in Twist. So again, this is what I got with the default. Look what you get if we run this other routine. And again, whether or not this is useful or applicable to what you do, I think it still makes the point that with a lot of these utilities, you get a lot more options and flexibility. What this minus layout feature does is it actually gives you kind of the structure of how the text is put together in the file. Again, is that something useful or usable? I don't know, but it just shows the extra flexibility you can get with the stuff. All right, boy, this is too slow. Let's keep going. One of here's an issue that we came up with from another customer. Now, it's not uncommon to work with pretty large files and use different utilities like the file check tool. In the past, we suggested using PDF info, PDF2K to gather information about PDF files. Here's an example. Let's go to, let me make sure I get to the right directory here. Here's a PDF. So we want to gather some information about it. This is a kind of a standard utility we've used, PDF info. And you see it gives me a bunch of good stuff I want to know about. Specifically, in this case, what the customer was trying to do was get the number of pages. So you can see that works. You can use that. Pretty handy. But they provided us with this file. And you can see if I try to get the information on that file, it refuses. This file is about 2.4 gigabytes. So there are issues with certain utilities when you get above 2 gigabytes in the Linux world. Now, for their purposes, they were running this initially with the file check tool. It couldn't do it. As you just saw, PDF info can't do it. And if I ran the PDF2K routine that we generally like, firstly, it hasn't imported to Red Hat 7, and if I ran it on Red Hat 6, you would discover that it will churn forever. So, wouldn't it be nice if there were some way to do it? And if you look, there's another utility in Linux that is proving to be very handy, which is called Qpdf. So you'll see here that I'm going to run that utility to try to get this page count on a 2.4 gigabyte PDF. And just as with any of these other ones, right, it's got its own specific syntax. In this case, to get a page count, you run this particular routine, and you can see we're calling the executable here. Now, I know you don't want to sit around waiting for me to copy a 2.4 gig file across my network. So I've already submitted this file, and it's sitting immediately before the set param from RE tool. So you can see that thing ran in about a second, and it gave me my page count, 720. So as you move forward, if you start working with these kind of files and running into issues, Qpdf is a very, very nice utility to work with. And I'm going to show you another example using this, which again is kind of a play off of a routine we had a customer running a couple of years ago. What he wanted to do was he wanted to work with large PDFs, and for the sake of, I think, some QC, I think he wanted to capture the first 5 pages of it and the last 5 pages of it, and he used the PS check tool. There's ways to do that where you can overload the PS check tool with page numbers and page ranges and things like that. But we don't want to do that. I'm going to do it with Cutepdf. And notice also now that I'm not calling this from the set param from RE. I'm calling it from command merge. The reason I'm doing it from here is that I'm not just trying to return some information. I'm trying to make a new page, right? So again, you got to know the syntax here, and we're not going to.
Can you hear me okay? Okay, let me get Mike's attention that he dropped off. Hold on 1 second. Okay, trying to get his attention now. If you all can just bear with us for a second. Hard to get in touch with him because he's not answering his phone because he's doing a webinar. Okay, we're still trying to get in touch with Mike. Bear with us a minute. Well, the tough part about doing a webinar is he's not answering the phone right now. But give me a minute, I'll get in touch with him. I'm sure what he's showing is pretty interesting though. Okay, I think we have him. Hopefully he'll jump right back on and catch us up. So sorry about that, just technical issues. Can't be avoided sometimes. You see Jude Skyping him, obviously, or texting him. Yeah, I see a message from Mike saying he's trying to dial back in now. It's a problem sometimes with webinars when you don't have audio response. Excuse me. Appreciate everybody's patience. Should just be another minute or so. And of course, no problems dialing in. Are you back on, Mike?
Hear me on the computer now? Somebody
Yeah,
say yes.
Yeah. Yes, I can hear you, Mike.
Actually, I could not even dial back in. It would not let me dial in.
That's
Okay,
really
what's the
strange.
last thing you heard me say?
Wow, it's hard to say because it was a little while.
Really?
I think you had just finished up
magic. I made
the
a
first part of the
Grayscale
PDF
images.
to
Oh, really? Okay,
yeah,
so
we didn't catch any of this Grayscale, the Grep Grayscale image magic stuff.
well, okay, I'll start back from there because this is really a pretty standard one that for years people haven't been able to do, which is to make a grayscale image out of twist. There's hoops you could jump through to do it, but it's always been easier just to run with image magic. So one thing you'll notice here again is I'm calling this from command merge. Because I'm not just trying to gather information about the file, but I'm actually trying to change and create a new file. And if you've ever worked with ImageMagick, you know that there are voluminous numbers of options that you can choose and run with there. So basically, I'm just using a couple simple ones. I can submit files and make grayscale. And having played with some of this stuff earlier, I'm assigning a specific contrast and brightness to the file. You probably already saw me running these through, so I don't see any reason to do it again, but you can see these are the results we get from these. And these were both RGB JPEGs that I started with, and you can't go wrong with dinosaurs. Another one, though, this was another customer request we had earlier this year, was the first question was, can Twist make a PNG file? And the answer is yes. You'll see the image action tool can do that. But the next question was, cool, but I want, can I make a PNG and have it drop the background out to transparent? The answer to that is no, Twist cannot do that. But if we look at our ImageMagick, again being called from command merge, you have the ability to set the white background to transparent. And I think I have a couple of files for this. This is a request that's been put into DALiM, so we're hopeful that they're going to be able to add that as an option for us. In fact, these are just kind of a couple of silly icons that I was putting together to use, I think for ES, where I wanted to drop the backgrounds out. And the other thing you'll see, and you've probably already noticed it, that one blew up because I think it had a space at the beginning of the name. We'll worry about that later. But you can see here, although I'm not sure it shows that well in preview, probably shows better in Photoshop.
Yeah, because preview won't show the transparency.
There we go. You can see this. You previously had white all around it, and it basically will knock all that out automatically for you. So that's a couple image magics. Boy, I'm going to show you UF raw real quick. Now, if you deal with photography at all, then you know that over the years digital cameras can capture JPEGs, maybe uncompressed TIFFs, but also more and more folks want to capture files in a RAW format. RAW is basically just the data picked directly off the sensor and not processed by the camera's color engine. And you may know they're sometimes referred to as digital negatives. So the nice thing about a RAW file is that, especially if you're manipulating it in Lightroom or other programs, you can make all sorts of non-destructive edits to it. So it's truly a source negative from which you can get multiple different results, as opposed to capturing JPEGs off a camera where things like the white and black point have already been set, and sharpness and smoothing and so forth have already been applied to it. UF raw, if you were to just issue the command on a Linux machine, would actually launch a utility that kind of looks Lightroom-ish. You can almost think of UF raw is to Lightroom as the GIMP is to Photoshop. That's kind of sort of a usable comparison. But for command line utilities, like what we want to mess around with here, you can call UF raw with a utility called UF raw batch. And if you look at what I'm running here, you know, you will say, first of all, where in the world did all that stuff come from? But these are the kind of arguments you can pass to this utility if you want to do batch conversions of files to, in this case, TIFF, but you can always choose your output format. So I've got
things that make that's one of the things that makes UF raw a lot more user friendly than trying to use DC raw.
Yeah, that's a good point to make, is that DC raw is what kind of sits underneath this thing. So what I have here is I actually have 3 different type of raw files. I have them from an Olympus, one from a Sony camera, one from a Panasonic. I'll just run the Panasonic and the Olympus ones. Now again, this is being run just with the default settings that I had set in there that I just kind of flashed up. And the thing to remember is, I mean, nobody works with raw files when they're, you know, actually putting together their final pages. They have to be converted to a, I'm not sure the right word is normal, but a typical format, we'll say. So if we look here, UF raw defaults, these are now converted to TIFF automatically through there. And again, dinosaurs, you can't go wrong. But let's say that, you know, you've run these and you say, all right, maybe you've come up with some kind of middle of the road settings that work for the vast majority of your files, but it would certainly be nice if you had some control over that where you could drive them through and maybe make a couple changes to the settings in there if you have a few outlier files that don't respond to your defaults. And I think you probably know where I'm going with this, but I'll go there anyways. Here's the workflow. But, you know, you can present as few or as many options as you want through, in this case, through WebLink, right? Maybe I want the exposure different. I want to kind of oversaturate it, and this is kind of an interesting tool because, again, raw files don't have any noise suppression applied to it, so it's a way to get rid of some of the noise that is inherent in files, especially if you're at higher ISO values. So we'll run these other 2 files this time. No, we will run the first 2 so we can have a comparison. Off they go. And you can probably guess that what's happening here now in this workflow is that we are still using the same arguments, but now we're just populating the values based on the variables that we're passing in via web link in this case. And we should get, there they are. And that one's a lot brighter than the earlier one. And boy, those dinosaurs are a lot redder. But you can see we basically ran the same files through the same tool, but now we can force in the arguments that we want. And again, I'll point out that UFRAW, you see these options I have in here. There are many, many more than that you can use to manipulate things. Since we lost my audio here, the last thing I wanted to show you, I probably don't have time to show you. I'll just make one comment about it, and maybe if anyone is interested,
okay on time,
we could. What's that?
I think you're okay on time. I think you're okay on time. If you want to go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to show you something really quick here then. Many of you are probably familiar with a particular workflow approach we've used over the last few years. Let me see. Yeah, here we go. For folks who make digital editions, you know, the routine where you run a bunch of files through, maybe convert them to RGB or whatever. Then you got to stitch them all together. This is this workflow, or you've probably seen some that are like this. And this workflow is dependent on a very specific procedure that DALiM whipped up a few years ago. And you know, it has to create a list of files, which is this thing. It has to make a count of all the files. It has to compare a couple variables in here. Then it has to feed all those files into a command merge tool. It has to call this list thing to figure out how to put them all in order. It works. But I was thinking, you know, I wonder if there is there maybe an easier way with some of these utilities that I've been blabbing about here. And I figured, you know, I think there is an easier way. So here's what we're going to do here. We're just going to use two of the utilities we discussed today. The first one is the Grep utility. One thing Grep can do, since this routine typically is dependent on merging all files once they're all in place, is if there's a specific folder where we're stashing things, one of the options for Grep is the -C command, which is a count. So if we know we're stashing files in a specific folder, we can constantly check it. And as files come through, we can determine if all the files are there, right? Or if we're just going to still wait for the last file to show up. So instead of that tickle procedure, we use Grep to count things. Now let's say a file comes through here, and the count value that Grep returns is the same as the number of pages detected. If that's true, we know, hey, all the guys are here. He can go on and do the dirty work. But notice now when we get ready to merge them, I'm not using a command merge tool like we did in that other one. I'm going to merge them all using that Cutepdf utility that we ran earlier. But the other thing you'll notice is I'm not running Cutepdf out of command merge. I'm actually calling a script. So this is another way you can work with external utilities. And this is a very, very simple script. Anyone that knows me knows I'm one of the dumbest scripting people on the planet. So what you'll see, and I'll just show it to you real quick. First I got to remember where it is. That's my script. That's tough stuff, right? So you remember on the command line before, I mean in command merge, I called Cutepdf. There's a specific routine. Again, you got to know the syntax. This is how you build a page from a source list. So basically, I'm telling it to read out of the stash folder where this stuff is and write to a new file. And you'll notice the $1, $2, $3, those are just 3 arguments that I'm passing to the script from Twist, right? So if you look at setparam from RE, we call the script. The first argument is, I believe, the base name, which tells it the folder to get into. This is basically telling it where to stash the file, and this is telling it how to name the file. So if this all works, it's going to stick the file, the resulting file. This is that goofy trick I talked about before. I like to stash them in the working directory setup folder. Then I'm just going to grab it out of there, and I'm done. And just to prove that I'm actually doing something to it, I stuck a merge XP in here, so it's going to slap a slug of text in it. So you'll know that I'm not pulling a fast one on you. So I'm going to get Alex's file again. It's 32-page special. Throw it in there. And again, this is no command merge, no tickle procedure for the whole merge routine. And as you know, whenever you bust a multi-page PDF apart in Twist, it does present a variable that defines the total pages. That's the one that we're using to check against, so we know when we have all the goodies in there. And you can see that guy was the last man in. You can also see it's pretty fast. If you need files that go fast, you get Alex's file. And there is our stitched together PDF in order. And like I said, I had it actually time-stamped the date in it, so it's definitely the real deal. And you know, whether or not this is a needed replacement for the current routine we run to do this stuff, I'm not sure that I can make that statement, but I think it does show you the kind of flexibility you can get with this stuff that allows you to kind of work outside the box a little bit, especially if you're good at this kind of thing, you know, building, hopefully at building more complex scripts than the thing that I did there, and getting a handle on the complexities of some of these routines like ImageMagick or UFRaw, and being able to leverage those for the kind of work that you do. I think that's about it, Fred.
That's about it.
I'll hand it back to you.
I'll take that over. Okay. Trying to sort through questions here. Most of the questions involve telling Mike that they couldn't hear him, but you got a couple I found through here.
You know, most people like it when they can't hear me.
Yeah, it's tough when your screen's doing stuff and we're trying to figure out what you're showing. So one of the questions here is, you know, if you have one of these, you know, command merge or something and you use it often, is it possible to actually just make a twist tool of that with some settings in it? And
well, you can.
Oh, you can.
Well, I was going to say you can make twist tools, although it's not something I think the average user can do. I know from what I've heard from I think the experience Phil at Blanchard has had is he actually decompiled I guess the jar file for an existing twist tool and kind of hacked it that way, but I'm not sure if there are other easier methods to do it.
Yeah, there's no given toolkit to do it that DALiM provides. It can be done. I'm sure some experienced programmers can handle it, like Phil here at on our semi-ad team. One thing to note is if you do create your own tool or modify a tool, you do need a specific licensing function called custom basic tool, I believe it's called. I don't think there's a price associated with it, but it is something that has to be added to your license to allow it to run that custom tool. Really the only other question here is about support for the third-party utilities and how that's handled. So, basically, the third-party utilities, the support on it is, as Mike said, the man page. And obviously most of these are open source code that there is a nice community out there that get help on using them or on some of the options for them. I know for UF-RAW, Mike and I used a lot of Google searching and found some suggested settings that worked really well for people, and kind of played with that when I was at a customer site a couple of months ago. So that's very helpful. From support from Blanchard standpoint, we play with this stuff often. We do it for customers, so you feel free to send a question to us. We may be able to help you with it really quickly, but it's nothing that we can guarantee you we can come up with a fix for, or definitely no. But obviously we have resources here, and we've gotten to play with a lot of this stuff for customers, so we're always happy to make suggestions for you. Did you have something to add to that, Mike?
Yep, that's pretty much it, I think.
All right. So I think that's all the questions I found through here. Let me see. Oh, hold on, a couple of new ones came in. Can the grep ES function move files to SFTP? I think is the question. Oh, sorry. S3 FTP. So I guess.
Yeah, those are really two totally different things.
Yeah.
It's grep is essentially a kind of a search utility, and set is, at the end of the day, pretty much a text editor. So
I mean, from what I've seen of S3 storage, there's basically an API for moving files to it, and you could use like a curl call through one of these tools possibly to move files to it. I haven't played with it specifically, but I'm pretty sure that you could probably script something to do that, or like Mike showed, just a shell script you create that actually calls a curl post to send files to S3 or something like that. It's basically, we were going to include the DALiM API stuff in here, but what we found is that the API is kind of complex to call. You can't call it just directly from command merge or set param from RE. It would require kind of a shell script behind the scenes to call it, and so we're kind of going to break that off into a separate webinar that we're going to do and do some more API functions for interacting between Twist and ES or any other products in ES as well. So we'll do that as a separate one, but I think S3 would kind of be the same if that was the question. And is DALiM looking at adding the third-party tools functionality into their toolkit? I think the answer to that would be, I think DALiM's always kind of looking at what they incorporate into the normal toolkit. I mean, in fact, some of these utilities are actually what are being used under the hood in some of the tools. Where DALiM doesn't. I mean,
DALiM uses iText for some of their PDF manipulations, and there are, I'm not sure which ones they are, but I'm quite sure there are some routines where they do call image magic, although I'm not 100% sure that's true.
Yeah, I know they used to. I'm not sure if they still do, because when they came out with the image action tool, I think they rewrote a lot of that themselves.
Yeah.
But they have, obviously, they have been open to working with third-party tools and using those under the hood where they've had to.
I mean, one of the reasons we got involved with the raw stuff is that we know that if you use the ES product, you can import a raw file and it will display an ES, but the next logical thing that follows from that, at least I think, is that, okay, you can show me one, but can you actually manipulate or convert one for us, which is where this kind of stuff came in then, to not only view it, but can you convert it and manipulate it to then a usable format.
Yep. All right, I think that's everything, and I think we've kind of run over our time anyway. So Mike, thanks a lot. I think that was pretty informative. And again, everyone, if you want to see when our webinar is going to be, we have them typically the second Wednesday of every month. You can go to the events page on the BlanchardSystems.com website, which will soon be kind of a refurbished or rewritten website soon. So thanks, everyone. Appreciate your attendance and hope to see you on the next call. Have a great day. Bye.